Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. The Nintendo Switch 2 has now been out for about 6 months, and I think it's time to kind of pause and take a look at how it's going. I picked up this thing on launch day, but I didn't make a review about it initially. I feel like first-party consoles like this need a little bit of time to bake, and so now here we are 6 months later, and I think it's worth kind of investigating whether or not I think this device is worth it. So we're going to talk about the console itself and the games that you can buy for it right now, as well as what accessories improve the overall experience, and how I have personally been enjoying the Nintendo Switch 2. And long story short, I think the Switch 2 is excellent, but it really depends on where you are. Like, do you have a Switch 1? Do you have a need for a Switch 2? And are you going to get the most out of it? So that's all the stuff we'll explore in this video. Grab a snack and drink. Let's go ahead and get started. So let's start at the very beginning. The Switch 2 is essentially a sequel to the Switch 1. It is backwards compatible with Switch 1 cartridges, but there are some improvements here. It's got a better processor, it's got a bigger screen, it has a new way of detaching and attaching your controllers, but overall the experience is going to be very similar. The UI is the same, just a little bit beefier. It's readily available from most retailers right now, which is a pretty good sign. You would think that, getting this close to the holidays and being the first year of its launch, it would be scarce like how the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles were, but no, there are plenty of Switch 2s out there. The base price is $450, but I think most people grab the Mario Kart World bundle for $500. This game alone costs $80 retail, and so you can save $30 by getting this bundle if you plan on getting this game. To give you context, the Switch 1 is selling for $340 on Best Buy right now, so there's about a $110 premium for the Switch 2 compared to the Switch 1. And the way I see it, if you're in the market between a Switch 1 and a Switch 2, I think the Switch 2 is an easy choice there for $110 more. You're going to get a lot better hardware, and it's also going to work for a lot longer when we start seeing more Switch 2 exclusive games. But that being said, if you've already got a Switch 1, I'm not really sure it's going to be worth an additional $450 to upgrade to this one. We'll talk more about this later. Now, with the launch of the Switch 2, we have been seeing game prices go up. Previously, the Switch 1 cartridges were all about $60. There were some premium games like Tears of the Kingdom that were $70, but for the most part, you could expect $60. And since then, everything has sort of increased. So most standard games are now $70, and then premium games like Mario Kart World are now going for $80, which I think is a really high price point. Now, if you're coming from the Switch 1, there are enhanced versions of some games, and sometimes it's free, sometimes it costs money. But for example, with these Zelda games, you can pay $10 each to get the Switch 2 versions. That's going to give you better graphics, a better frame rate, and just an overall better experience. And so I personally think that if you've already got one of these cartridges, it's well worth the $10. But at the same time, they are also selling Switch 2 versions of those games, which will cost you $70 for Breath of the Wild or $80 for Tears of the Kingdom. Now, the nice thing about the Switch 2 versions of some of these games, like Tears of the Kingdom, is that they will also still work in the Switch 1 because the cartridge is the same. So even if you buy the Switch 2 versions of Tears of the Kingdom, or the latest Pokemon game, or the upcoming Metroid Prime 4, these will still work in the original Switch 1, and you can enjoy them on the Switch 2. So I think that is actually a pretty pro-consumer move. I'm not sure how long Nintendo will maintain this kind of option here, but I hope they do it for a long time because I love the idea of supporting the older consoles at the same time as the Switch 2. But I also appreciate that you can go the other route too. So if you pick up the Switch 1 version, you can pay the $10 to get the upgrade pack, and so you kind of get the best of both worlds no matter what version you buy. But it's also worth noting that Nintendo rolled out this new platform, which they are calling Game Key cards, and they look just like regular Switch cartridges, but they don't have anything on them. They will trigger you to download the digital version of the game. So it kind of looks like a physical cartridge, but it actually is not. And this has been a bummer for me because I got a pretty hefty Nintendo Switch 1 cartridge collection, and I feel like I don't want to collect them for Switch 2 because I don't really want those Game Key cards just because it doesn't actually have the game on it. And I love the idea of preserving these cartridges for like future generations. So the way that I've been doing it is buying the Switch 1 cartridge if they have it, and then paying that $10 upgrade to be able to play it on the Switch 2. That way I maintain my Switch 1 catalog, but for Switch 2, I've mostly just been doing that and then buying them digitally if it's going to be a Game Key card. Now let's talk a bit about the hardware. Although I did a first impressions when this first came out. I'll leave a link down below that really goes into detail about my experience with the hardware on its own, and none of that has really changed. At the end of the day, I think the buttons and controls are just fine, except for the analog sticks. These feel very limiting, kind of stunted. They are essentially the same mechanism as they were on the Switch 1, which just kind of flops over to the side as opposed to feeling like a full analog stick. One thing worth noting is the plastic on my Joy-Cons is starting to feel a little bit sticky, which will often happen with console controllers, and it's kind of a bummer. I do live in Hawaii, which has, a lot more humidity than most other places, but yes, my thumbsticks are getting a little bit sticky. I imagine in a couple years I'm probably going to have to replace them, but hopefully by then we'll have other third-party options. As far as using the device in handheld mode, I think it's okay, but it is rather flat. That's to make it dockable, but we'll talk more about accessories that will enhance that later on. It is worth noting that this thing is pretty heavy. It's 534 grams with the controllers attached to it, compared to 420 grams on the Switch OLED. It's to the point where my kids don't really like playing this in handheld mode. They would rather play on the Switch 1. Now for me, I spend a lot of time playing on heavier handhelds like the Steam Deck, so this doesn't feel too heavy for me. It's about right for an adult, but if you're picking this up for a kid, it is one thing worth considering. Now, one thing that's surprising is that here, even 6 months later, the only options you have for a Joy-Con that will snap in place like it does on the Switch 2 is from Nintendo themselves. There are no third-party options that will allow you to have the same functionality. There are some other options like a telescopic controller. This is the GameSir X5S, and this is a Bluetooth controller that can snap on, mostly used for phones and tablets, but you could use it with the Switch as well. The drawbacks of a setup like this is that it won't be dockable, so you're not going to be able to slide this in place. And then also I worry a little bit about making any sort of pressure along these pins right here. Now there's nice rubber padding on the ends of these, and so it's not a huge deal, but I still think that there's probably room for a better third-party solution. If I had to guess, there's probably some sort of trademark or some other issue that prevents people from being able to make third-party options for this yet, but we had third-party options for the Switch 1 that would slide down, so I'm hoping something like that will show up at some point. However, the accessory ecosystem for the Switch 2 is alive and bustling, and so let's talk about some of the things that I've been doing to enhance my Switch 2 experience by using third-party accessories. So first and foremost, I've got a screen protector on this. You've got a bunch of options out there, but the one that I've been using is from dbrand. They call it the Prism, and it is a little bit expensive. It's $25 for a 2-pack, but it is foolproof. It comes with its own installation tray, and it's as easy as just cleaning off your screen, putting the tray on top, pulling one tab, which will actually apply it, and then swiping across the top of it to put it into place. I kind of loathe putting on screen protectors because I always get one little piece of dust in there, but this whole system that they have within dbrand takes all that worry away. And I do appreciate that it comes in a 2-pack, which allows me to have a peace of mind in case I mess it up that first time. The other one I would recommend is the matte screen protector from JSaw. It's usually around $12. It's on Black Friday sale right now, but this is great too. It's got a 2-pack on it and it won't be reflective. So if you're looking for something like this, this is also a great option. Now, beyond screen protectors, I've got a ton of other accessories that I've been testing over the past 6 months as well. Some of these were sent over by the company to review, and others I bought myself based on recommendations from others. So for example, with the screen protector from dbrand, I did buy that one myself, but the matte screen protector from JSaw is one that they had sent over to me previously that I had tested. So as I go over some of my favorites here, I'll leave a little note at the top just to let you know whether or not I purchased it myself or it was something that was sent over to me for review. But like with all my videos, all opinions are going to be my own. They're not seeing this video ahead of time, and of course, no money was exchanged in any way. So when it comes to protecting your device beyond just the screen protector, you've got a bunch of other options. The first would be just a regular old case if you aren't going to add anything else to your device. I'd say this one is probably my favorite. It is called the Shock Absorbent Case from JSOX. It's around $20 on the website. It's got space for 10 cartridges, and I like the fact that it's just a hard shell case that you can snap onto your Switch 2. So it doesn't add a lot of bulk, but it does protect the thing. And if you're looking for a more traditional like material case, I really like this one just because it has kind of like a water resistant texture to it. And yeah, it's got space for your Switch too. So this is also a nice one. It's from MobaPad, and this one costs around $20-25. Now personally, I don't really use the Switch 2 naked like this. I use what they call grip cases, which just enhance the overall ergonomics and make it a little bit thicker and more comfortable. So I've got a few recommendations and favorites based on your particular use case. And so this one right here is called the Savage Raven Neo Grip, and it's from a company called Skull & Co. And the reason why I like this one is I think it's the most comfortable dockable option that you have. So this one just kind of snaps into place, and it still allows you to dock it no problem, but it gives you these big ergonomic grips on each side. And they've got a bunch of different options that you can swap them out for. And yeah, I think this one feels really comfortable. This is one of those that I did purchase myself based on recommendations from others, and I do like the overall feel of it. The material here kind of looks leathery, but it feels kind of like a harder plastic. And yeah, I think it's good. Now, if you're looking for a grip that can also protect the front of your device, then the Omni Grip is pretty neat. This is made by Epic Printing Shop, which is a 3D printing shop on Etsy who usually makes stuff for retro handhelds, but this is their first time making a Switch accessory. They've even got it up on Amazon. It's $20 right now, and this one was sent over for me to check out. So the way this one works is it snaps into place and it gives you ergonomic grips on the back. It's just kind of like a straight line here. It's pretty comfortable to use it on its own. It's made with a soft plastic that kind of feels impact resistant, so I feel like I can drop this thing no problem. It's also got these little slide out compartments which will allow you to add game cartridges, so you can put 4 cartridges in this case as well. But the real kicker about this one is that you can also put it on the front like this, and so it'll snap into place and protect your device on the front. Now, it's not going to fully cover everything. You can see that the back obviously is going to be exposed, and also the shoulders and triggers are going to be exposed too. So it's not going to be a perfect option, but if you are looking for some protection without having to have like a 2-piece assembly, then this will work because it's a grip and a case. Now, if you're looking for the best handheld experience, I think that this one right here, which is the mod case from JSOX, is probably the most comfortable of the bunch. I really like the grips here. It's kind of a soft plastic, and it does have that bumpy texture to it as well. It makes it really grippy. And so I really like the angle and the overall feel of this one in handheld mode. But this one is not dockable in any way. You can't pull off the Joy-Cons or anything. So this really just converts it into a handheld. So it really depends on how you're playing it. But this one to me feels like the most comfortable. One nice thing about this grip case is that it also comes with a front shell, and it has space for 8 additional cartridges. And this altogether costs $30 for this whole system. And so you're able to close it up and protect it like this, but you are going to have 2 different pieces to carry around. So it's really going to be up to you. If you want to use it docked, you've got to buy this other accessory for another $15 that makes it basically attached to the dock. And I think this is just a really rudimentary and ugly situation. And so I don't really recommend this whole setup here. I really only think that the JSOX is going to be good if you are using it specifically for handheld mode. Honestly, all I use on my Switch 2 are these things. These are called the Joy-Lock grips, and they're from dbrand. Now, dbrand's got its own ecosystem when it comes to parts for the Nintendo Switch 2, but I think a lot of it is overkill. Like, they got this thing called Kill Switch, which is a whole case and everything. This is just too much for me. I don't like the fact that it's not easy to dock. You've got to use a special adapter for this one too. It's just really complicated. But I really love these grips. You just put the Joy-Con inside of them, and they fit perfectly, and then you just kind of put it into place, and so it turns your handheld into something that's just a lot more comfortable to use. And you can buy these on their own. It's only $20, but it's not an easy process. You have to go to the dbrand website, go to the Kill Switch page, and then tell them you don't want the Kill Switch. You're going to have to go through their warnings, and then there near the option, there's an option to pick one that says extra Joy-Lock grips for $20. While you're there, you can also grab their screen protectors for a lot cheaper. It's $12 if you buy them this way. And so that's how I do it. I just have the Joy-Lock grips and none of the other Kill Switch accessories, which allows me to dock this thing no problem. Now, dbrand had some issues with their first version of these Joy-Lock grips, where if you held it in one side, the device would sometimes fall off, but they fixed it and they sent out replacements for everybody who had bought the original. So these are the replacements right here, and they feel great. And suffice to say, if you buy one right now, it's going to be the improved version, which I think is super comfortable. It's not quite as comfortable as the JSOX handheld version, but it's still very good. After that, I use this thing. This is the mechanism adapter. It's a whole ecosystem of different adapters and accessories that you can use with this thing, and it fits just right on the back of the Switch 2, and it still makes it dockable. And they've been making these adapters for years now for the Steam Deck and other handhelds, and now they've got a Switch 2 version. And I think it's great because you can tie into the rest of the ecosystem. Some people will use it as a mount or attach their phone to it, and sometimes I will use it with my gaming pillow that they have as well. I made a whole video about this thing too. This is kind of crazy, but honestly, it works pretty darn well. It's a great fit for the Switch 2 if you do get fatigued from holding this in handheld mode, because it takes that weight off your shoulders. Now, one clever thing you can do with the mechanism mount is you can put it underneath the kickstand, which means you can still use the kickstand, but then also use the mount for something else. If you wanted to have a second screen attached to it for maybe like looking up a guide as you're playing, you can do all of that here. And so yes, I keep things very simple on my Switch 2. I've got the Joy-Lock grips, and I love the idea of just pulling them off and still being very ergonomic while still making this thing fully dockable. And then I've got that mechanism mount right here, so I can use that ecosystem too. The only challenge that this setup presents is that it is kind of thick, and that means that, your typical cases for the Switch 2 are not going to fit. The case that I use is kind of overkill, but it's this thing. It's made for the Steam Deck. It's from a company called Waterfield, and this thing was $100. It's not cheap, but it's got a magnetic clasp to it, so it's really easy to open and close. And the Switch 2, even with the added grip, fits really nicely. And so this is the way that I actually travel with my Switch 2. I can just kind of open it up and pull it out. And so this has been like a really great travel companion, like how it is on the Steam Deck. But yeah, it's not cheap. This thing is $100. They're more like a boutique and luxury brand. So I'm not really saying you got to spend this much money, but this is just what I use. Now, beyond using it in just handheld mode, you can also use this thing in like tabletop mode or docked. So let's talk about the control experience for that and the other options that you have. So out of the box, it'll come with this thing right here. It's kind of beat up, but this is essentially just an attachment that you'll be able to use with your Joy-Cons to be able to kind of turn it into a controller. I'm not a huge fan of this setup. I liked it a lot on the Switch 1. I used that thing to death, but this just kind of feels weird. Like it doesn't feel like a cohesive controller. And so personally, I don't really use it with this attachment very much. Instead, if I am going to be using it in that kind of setup, I've really been enjoying this thing. It's called the Dual Wield, and it's from a company called Genki. And so this is actually its own docking and charging station all in one. So essentially you can push this button and eject these things, and then you can attach your Joy-Cons to this. And for me, this is a lot more comfortable. It kind of turns it into like this perfect angle where it's a really comfortable controller, and I can use it with my kill switch Joy-Locks as well. So it's not going to interfere with that. And so I really like this because it just kind of allows me to use this as a regular controller, but it also will charge the controllers at the same time. This has a little battery in it. And so this thing kind of works as its own little ecosystem where you can have this plugged into the Switch 2 dock, and then you can have this set up here, and then you can put your Joy-Cons on this instead. So it'll charge it as like a charging dock, and then you can like pull the whole thing off and use it like this. So you got a bunch of different options here. I think for $40, there's a lot that you can do, especially if you own multiple Joy-Cons. So if you've got an additional pair for like 4-player gameplay, then something like this might be a pretty good fit. Now for me personally, I prefer to use a dedicated controller for my Switch 2 compared to those Joy-Cons because I don't like those analog sticks. Now, this is the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. I've got this nice hard shell case from TomTalk for it, and I did a whole dedicated video about this thing as well, but to be honest, I have not used this that much over the past 6 months. It really comes down to two things. Number one, this is expensive. It's $90. I think that is too much for a controller that is really limited in its functionality. It only works on this Switch 2. The other thing is that it's kind of a pain in the butt to charge compared to other options which have dockable solutions. This thing is not the worst in the world. You just plug it in with a USB-C cable, but honestly, there are so many better options out there now. I've tested out a ton of these over the past 6 months. I was supposed to make a dedicated review about it. I never did, but the one that I've settled on is the 8BitDo Pro 3. I'll leave my review down below if you want to watch my whole experience with this, but there are many reasons why I like it. The first is that you can swap out the buttons, and you can even use colored options like this, and it's just a very comfortable controller. It kind of looks like a Super Nintendo controller, but it's got kind of like a PlayStation feel to it as well. And so yes, this has been something I've really enjoyed. The most important part to me is that it's got a dock that will charge it when you put it into place, and then you can pull it off and it'll connect automatically to your Switch 2. And so this has been a very seamless experience for me, and this is what I leave in my living room entertainment center. There are a ton of different color options like this orange one, which I think is really fun. And so yeah, that's been my favorite experience overall, is it adds a little bit of joy to my docked experience by playing with the 8BitDo Pro 3. It's also got a classic Super Nintendo style D-pad, which feels great when doing any sort of retro style games too. And so yeah, there's a lot of reasons why I like this controller. They've also done a recent firmware update that will wake the Nintendo Switch up from sleep, and this is one of the few controllers that can do it. Now, it's kind of a gimmick to actually get it working in the first place. There's a whole video on the 8BitDo website that'll walk you through it, but once you have it set up, it's pretty nice. All you have to do is just shake it to wake it up, like you could do with other controllers for the Switch 1. It's now working on this one. If you're looking for something that has a more Nintendo Switch Pro sort of feel to it, then I would say that this one, the 8BitDo Ultimate 2, is also an excellent choice. This one comes with its own rechargeable dock, and then also it does now wake it from sleep too with a firmware update. And so yeah, you've got a couple different options when it comes to playing with third-party controllers on the Nintendo Switch 2, and these are a lot cheaper. They're usually around $50 to $60 as opposed to $90. So honestly, you can't really go wrong between either of these two options, and yes, they work great on the Nintendo Switch 2. And then finally, one other thing worth noting is that for additional storage, the Switch 2 uses a special SD card called the microSD Express. This is a faster read-write speed, but it is more expensive, and it only goes up to 512 gigabytes in total storage space, at least as of making this video. We might see 1 terabyte at some point, but right now the highest you can go is 512. When the Switch 2 first came out, we only had a couple options, like this one from SanDisk, which cost upwards of like $60 for this one or $100 for 512 gigabytes, but thankfully more brands have been coming out with their own options. So now there's a Samsung version, which is currently on sale for Black Friday, and it's $75 for 512 gigabytes. I've been using this cheaper brand right here called ONN. I think I got this on like walmart.com for around $50 or $60. It's been working fine so far over the past 6 months. I'm not really sure about longevity, but so far it's been great. Okay, now that we talked about all the different ways that you can enjoy the Switch 2, let's talk about the games themselves and what I've been enjoying about them. I think the first thing to mention is that even here, 6 months later, we don't have a lot of must-have titles that are exclusive to the Switch 2. As far as I'm concerned, there's Mario Kart World as well as Donkey Kong Bonanza, but everything else either works on the Switch 1 or is not out yet. And don't get me wrong, these are both great games. I started out, playing a lot of Mario Kart World because it was a launch title, and I really enjoyed like the free roam aspect that we had in this game. It does feel like it has a bit more dynamics to it compared to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But I gotta say that I fell off this game pretty quickly. It looks beautiful, like I love these updated graphics, but for the most part, there's just a lot more tracks that I enjoy on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and so I often find myself going back to that one, even if it's not the superior version or at least the most recently updated one. And it's kind of crazy to me that they charge $80 for this game too, because I don't feel like I got $80 worth out of this game either. Now, Donkey Kong Bonanza is a whole different story. This game is a joy to play. It's made by the same people that made Mario Odyssey, and it really has that feel to it too. I still haven't beat this game. I've kind of been savoring little moments here and there, but it's one of those where I want to sit down on a rainy day and really play through it, and I haven't gotten there yet. Graphically, I think this one looks awesome too, and I love that you can just kind of barrel through the entire environment as well. So yes, this one's a lot of fun, and I think it's really the only must-have title that's exclusive to the Switch 2 right now. Personally, over the past 6 months, most of the games that I've been picking up have been for the Switch 1, just because these are actual physical cartridges that have the game inside of them, and they'll also work on the Switch 1 and Switch 2, and so I'm still kind of doing it old school, so to speak. The big shift over the past couple years for me is that I no longer really buy any indie games, primarily on the Nintendo Switch. When I first got the Switch several years back, I was buying all my lightweight games here just because it was a really nice platform to be able to play handheld and docked, and so, games like Celeste is where I would play them. But over the years, now that we've got more Steam-friendly handhelds, I've just been buying these games primarily on Steam. And so this has been a big shift for me, where I was going onto the Nintendo eShop and trying to find the best deal and picking up a digital version of an indie game and then playing it on my account. But since then, I've been buying them on Steam instead. Now what I do, if I have a game that I really love on Steam, then I'll look for the physical version on Switch. That way I can kind of collect that physical version so that I have something kind of cool to collect and look at over the years. And so lately, I've only been using the Switch and the Switch 2 specifically for Nintendo games, those that I can't play on other platforms like Steam. So Donkey Kong Bonanza, yeah, sure. Mario Wonder and Zelda and Mario Kart World, like all of those are excellent fits for the Nintendo ecosystem, but I'm not really journeying outside of that. And because Nintendo themselves haven't released a lot of Switch 2 games that have appealed to me just yet, I haven't bought a lot since then. I'm looking forward to Metroid Prime 4, but I think that's really all I have on my radar right now. Okay, and then finally I want to talk about how my family and I have been using the Switch 2 in general to see whether or not it may be a good fit for the way that you use these devices too. So number one, for the most part, we leave our Switch 2 in docked mode. I think it's just because the graphics look so much better on our bigger TV. I can use that 8-bit DOE controller, and so this for the most part is how we've been enjoying our games. And so even though we do have a 1080p display on this new Switch 2, I like the fact that some games will play in 4K on my bigger TV, and so that's how I've been enjoying it for the most part. We still have our Switch 1 around, and that's mostly because the kids prefer to play on this in handheld mode, so sometimes they'll grab it, take it into their room and kind of play right there. I will sometimes play this thing in handheld mode, but it's not super often. Generally, I prefer to play something like the Steam Deck, and the joysticks on these Joy-Cons in particular are just really limiting, and so I often will only play more D-pad centric games like Mario Wonder. The battery life is okay. It's about 2 hours for really demanding games, but upwards of like 6 and 7 with something that's not too hard to play. And so I think that's pretty decent given how thin the overall Switch 2 is. So yes, for the most part, we treat the Switch 2 as a docked console, like any other home gaming console. And then it's also one that's more travel friendly. So if we're going on a trip, we can grab the Switch 2, throw it in my case, and that's not something we can do with our PlayStation or Xbox. Okay, so wrapping up, I've got 2 questions I want to answer. The first is whether or not I think it's worth it if you're upgrading from the Switch 1 right now. And then also, if you don't have anything, is it worth just buying the Switch 2? So number 1, coming from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 is a very seamless experience because the UI is very similar, and you'll be able to play your Switch 1 cartridges and eShop games directly on the Switch 2 already. Not only that, many of these games are going to play better, like they'll have better frame rates and faster loading times, and sometimes you have to pay maybe a $10 upgrade, or sometimes it'll be a free upgrade, so I do think it's worth it in that regard. However, also bear in mind that the Switch 2 base price is $450, and that is a pretty hefty upgrade from the Switch 1. And because all but a few games are still going to work on the Switch 1, including the upcoming Metroid Prime 4, I don't see a lot of incentive to upgrade to the Switch 2 for $450+. So I do think it is more prudent to wait until we have more Switch 2 exclusive games that will really kind of move that tide over, because as this stands right now, I think the best place to be is as a Switch 1 gamer. You're going to be able to play all these awesome games, and you don't have to buy a new console to do that. Now, if you're looking to buy either the Switch 1 or the Switch 2, then I think that the Switch 2 is the easiest recommendation. It's only $110 more, but you've got a better processor, you're going to be able to see better resolutions, and of course it's going to be more future-proof because you'll be able to continue to play Switch 2 titles. For me personally, I only really bought the Switch 2 at launch because I have a YouTube channel and I wanted to make a video about it, but honestly, I kind of regret buying it. I don't feel like I've gotten a full $500 out of this over the Switch 1, which I could have just been enjoying this entire time. It was great to be able to make some videos about it, but personally, I have not been using it as much. Now, I don't actually buy consoles usually in their first year of launch. I'll wait a year or two. That way there's a ton of games in the library when I do finally pick it up, and often they will be cheaper at that point too. And so that's kind of my recommendation as well. The longer you wait, the better these things will be. So that's really about it for the Switch 2. I kind of just wanted to go through how it's been over the past 6 months. It's still a really great piece of hardware, but I think it's going to be better about a year from now. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you pick one of these up, or are you enjoying it, or do you regret it a little bit like me? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.